Let's be real. We've all been there, waiting for a text, overanalyzing a reply, wondering if we did something wrong, or worse, if we're just not enough. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud if someone's making you feel small, confused, or invisible. The most powerful thing you can do is stop showing up for them. This isn't about playing games. It's not about revenge or pretending you're cold and heartless. It's about self-respect. It's about recognizing your value and refusing to hand it over to someone who doesn't know what to do with it. So, if you're stuck in a cycle of chasing someone who only gives you breadcrumbs, it's time to stop, not to punish them, but to protect you. Let's talk about how to reclaim your power, one intentional silence at a time. When you constantly give someone your time, your thoughts, and your energy, especially someone who isn't treating you with the same level of care, it slowly chips away at your confidence. You start doubting yourself, overthinking everything you said or did, wondering if you should have texted first or waited longer. And that's the trap. When you're emotionally invested in someone who's inconsistent or unavailable, you give them power they haven't earned of your absence. That power doesn't come from anything they did to deserve it. It comes from the attention you're giving them. When you act like someone matters more than they actually show up for you, you're essentially placing them above your own emotional well-being. Reclaiming your emotional power starts with a simple but often uncomfortable realization: you don't need their validation to feel whole. The moment you start seeing your attention as something valuable, something that needs to be protected, you begin to shift the dynamic. Think about it, if every thought you spend on them makes you feel anxious, small, or unworthy, how is that helping you? It's not. You're feeding a loop that reinforces the idea that they matter more than your peace. When someone creates confusion instead of clarity, that's already your answer. But we often ignore it because we're hoping things will change. We're waiting for a sign that they care as much as we do. That sign never comes when you're chasing. It comes when you step back. Ignoring someone who's not treating you right isn't petty. It's clarity in action. It's saying, I'm not going to fight to prove I'm worthy of your time. That's not cold. That's strong. When you stop giving your attention to someone who thrives on inconsistency, you're no longer playing their game. You're resetting the terms of your own value. This is about you choosing peace over performance. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you handed over too quickly. Your time, your energy, your softness. And saying, actually, I get to decide who's worthy of that. There's also a deep psychological shift that happens when you stop trying to force someone to see your value. You start seeing it for yourself. Because all that emotional energy you were pouring into them, it now flows back into you. You begin reconnecting with your own standards, your own desires, and your own intuition. That voice inside that said, something feels off. It was right. The moment you stop asking, why won't he choose me? And start asking, why am I choosing someone who makes me feel like this? That's when you take your power back. It doesn't require a dramatic exit. No angry message, no final goodbye. Just a quiet decision: he no longer has access to my attention. And that silence, it's louder than any confrontation. It's not passive. It's deeply intentional. Because when you act like he doesn't matter, you're not denying his humanity. You're just refusing to let his behavior dictate your self-worth. You're refusing to show up for someone who wouldn't cross the street for you, let alone match your effort. The irony is, this is when most people notice what they lost. But by then, it's not about whether they come back. It's about whether you still want what you once chased. Because when you've reconnected with your power, the version of you who tolerated breadcrumbs no longer exists. And you'll find that the silence you once feared is now your most powerful form of self-respect. Every time you think about him, text him, check if he's watched your story, or wonder what he's doing, you're spending something. That something is your attention, and whether you realize it or not, it's one of the most valuable currencies you have. Attention is not just about time. It's about emotional focus. It's about where your energy goes. And in dating, especially when you're dealing with someone who isn't fully showing up for you, how you spend that currency can either build your self-worth or completely drain it. Most people don't realize that by giving their attention freely, constantly, and unconditionally, they're creating a dynamic where their value is diluted. If someone knows that no matter what they do or don't do, you'll be there, texting, initiating, forgiving, waiting, they stop seeing you as someone they need to earn. You become available on demand. And here's the harsh truth on: people don't value what they don't have to work for. It's not because they're bad people. It's human psychology. When something is abundant, easy, and always there, we assume it will always be. But when something is selective, deliberate, and scarce, we pay more attention. We want it more. That's why ignoring someone who isn't giving you consistent effort isn't about playing hard to get. It's about honoring the true value of your attention. If they've shown you they don't appreciate your time or make space for your emotions, why continue spending your energy on them? You're essentially funding an emotional investment that gives you zero return. And you wouldn't do that with your money, so why do it with your energy? Let's break this down. Think about someone you admire, someone whose time and respect means something to you. Chances are, part of the reason you value them is because they don't hand it out to just anyone. You respect the fact that their attention is intentional. It has weight. That's what your attention needs to become. When you start treating it like something precious, not something to be given freely to someone just because you like them, you start attracting people who actually want to earn it. The other powerful side of this shift is internal. The less you spend your attention on someone who's not treating you right, the more you have to invest in yourself. You start reconnecting with the things that build your confidence, your passions, your friendships, your goals, and something interesting happens. You begin to feel less anxious, less desperate, less reactive, because you're no longer on edge, waiting for someone else to validate your worth. You're giving that attention to yourself, which is where it belongs. People always say, well, what if I ignore him and he just moves on? And the honest answer I say, if someone disappears when you stop chasing them, they were never truly choosing you to begin with. Your attention was the only thing holding their presence in your life. That's not love, and it's definitely not healthy connection. That's dependence. That's ego. That's comfort. But it's not someone who's meeting you at your level. Letting them go isn't a loss, it's liberation. So the next time you find yourself obsessing, checking your phone, or wondering what he's thinking, pause and ask yourself, is this the best use of my emotional currency? Because if the answer is no, then it's time to redirect it somewhere worthy, somewhere it can grow, somewhere it actually gets you closer to what you want: real love, real respect, and real connection. Not crumbs, not confusion, and definitely not someone who doesn't show up for you the way you show up for them. There's something powerful about silence. Not the kind that's used to punish or manipulate, but the kind that says, without needing to say a word, I'm done explaining my worth to someone who doesn't see it. We often believe we need to give closure, to talk it out, to make our point clear when someone's not treating us right. But often, the most honest and dignified response is to stop responding at all. Because if someone isn't showing up for you in the way you need, if they're inconsistent, disrespectful, or half in, then silence becomes your boundary. It becomes the message they can't interrupt or argue with. When you keep engaging with someone who isn't meeting you where you are emotionally, you give them power over your peace. You keep the door open, even slightly, to more confusion and emotional instability. And the problem with that is, they get used to access without effort. They begin to believe that no matter how they act, or don't act, you'll still be there, willing to explain, to argue, to care. But when you go quiet, when you pull back not out of spite, but from self-respect, the entire dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they're left to sit with their own behavior. And in that space, something important happens: clarity. Silence removes the noise. It removes the emotional clutter. It takes away the arguments, the what-ifs, the back and forth. It creates space for you to breathe and reflect, and space for them to truly feel your absence. And here's where it gets interesting. People often don't realize what they had until it's no longer feeding their ego. Until the texts stop. Until your energy stops showing up on their doorstep. That's when silence starts speaking louder than any words ever could. It's not easy, though. Choosing silence requires emotional strength. It means resisting the urge to explain yourself again. It means letting go of the idea that if you just say the right thing, they'll finally get it. But the truth is, if they cared enough, they wouldn't have needed multiple explanations. They would have changed their behavior. So silence becomes the most honest reflection of where things really stand. You're no longer participating in a story where you keep trying to prove your worth. You're exiting it altogether. There's also a deeper, more personal side to this kind of silence. It allows you to come back to yourself. When you're constantly in reactive mode, waiting for them to text, wondering how to respond, replaying conversations in your head, you lose touch with your own needs and desires. Silence brings you back into alignment. It reminds you that you don't have to beg to be chosen. You don't have to fight for clarity from someone who's keeping you in confusion. You can choose yourself, and don't be surprised if the moment you go quiet, they suddenly try to reappear. That's not always a sign of genuine interest. It's often just a reaction to losing your attention. The key is knowing the difference. When someone truly cares, they won't just respond to your silence. They'll change the behavior that caused it. They'll show up differently, not just because they miss you, but because they finally understand what it takes to be with you. But whether they change or not isn't the point. The point is, you chose peace over performance. You chose stillness over struggle. You let silence say what words never could. I know my worth, and I'm done negotiating it. And in doing that, you not only protect your energy, you reclaim your power. When something is always available, it stops feeling special. It's basic human psychology. The more accessible something is, the more we take it for granted, whether we mean to or not. This is why constantly being there for someone who's not reciprocating your energy doesn't win their affection. It lowers your value in their eyes. It sends the message that they don't need to do anything to earn your time or effort. And the moment someone believes they can keep you without showing up for you, they stop trying. That's why scarcity builds value. Think about anything in life that you truly admire or desire, whether it's a dream job, a luxury item, or an incredible opportunity. Part of what makes it exciting is that it's not easy to get. It requires effort, commitment, and consistency. You don't just stumble into it, you work for it. That's what makes the reward feel meaningful. Relationships work the same way. When your attention and energy are always on tap, there's nothing left for the other person to earn. But when you pull back, when you start being selective about who gets access to you, it forces people to reevaluate how they're showing up. If you're always texting first, always available to hang out, always the one trying to fix things, then there's no friction, no tension, and no challenge. And this isn't about playing games. It's not about pretending to be busy or acting cold to manipulate someone. It's about recognizing that your time is valuable, and not everyone should have unlimited access to it. If someone wants to be in your life, they should meet you halfway, not just when it's convenient, not just when they're bored, consistently. When you create that space, when you stop showing up the second they call, you give them room to feel your absence. And absence creates contrast. It allows someone to see what life feels like without your attention constantly validating them. For some people, that wake-up call is what triggers genuine change. For others, it simply reveals that they were never really in it to begin with. Either way, you win, because you stop being emotionally depleted by someone who only shows up on their terms. Scarcity doesn't mean withholding affection. It doesn't mean being distant for the sake of it. It means being intentional. It means aligning your actions with your standards. If someone's behavior doesn't match the energy you give, then you stop giving it. Not to punish them, but to protect your peace. You let them come to you. You let them show, through effort and consistency, that they value your presence. And if they don't, then you've just saved yourself time, energy, and heartbreak by not investing in someone who was never really in it. There's also an internal shift that happens when you embrace this mindset. You start to respect yourself more. You stop chasing love and start attracting it. Because when you treat yourself like someone who's worth the chase, who doesn't hand their heart to just anyone, you naturally command more respect from others. You teach people how to treat you by the standards you enforce, not just the words you say. And enforcing those standards often looks like walking away when someone won't rise to meet them. People might be confused at first. They might wonder why you've pulled back. But the ones who care, the ones who are capable of something real, will step up. And the ones who don't, they'll fade out. That's what happens when your attention becomes something people have to earn, not something you hand out for free. That's when you start attracting people who are serious, intentional, and emotionally available. Because you've shown that you are, too. When you stop centering your life around someone who doesn't show up for you, something remarkable happens. You begin to rediscover how full your life can actually be. Too often, we get caught in a loop of obsessing over one person, what they're thinking, why they're distant, whether they care. Every small action from them feels huge. Every silence feels like a message. Your mood rises and falls based on their attention. But that kind of emotional dependency creates a dangerous illusion that your happiness is tied to their presence. It's not. And the moment you shift your focus back to your own life, you begin to break that illusion piece by piece. Creating a life that's too full to obsess isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about genuinely becoming so engaged with your own purpose, joy, and self-respect that their inconsistency becomes background noise. It doesn't shake you the way it used to because your emotional world isn't orbiting around them anymore. You start putting energy into things that give you something back: your passions, your career, your friendships, your well-being. You stop sitting around waiting for a message and start making plans that don't include wondering whether they'll show up. And this doesn't have to be some massive reinvention. It starts small. Go to the gym not because you want to distract yourself, but because you love how it makes you feel strong and clear-headed. Reach out to friends not to vent about him, but to genuinely connect. Laugh, and be reminded that your life is rich with people who show up consistently. Dive into something creative, meaningful, or challenging. Not because you're trying to move on, but because your energy deserves better places to go than waiting on someone who won't commit to you fully. The more you fill your time with things that make you feel alive and grounded, the less space there is for someone who makes you feel small. And you'll notice something important: your standards rise naturally. You start to see how little you were accepting before. You stop entertaining half-hearted effort. Not because you're bitter, but because you're too busy living a life that feels whole without crumbs from someone else's table. When your world is full, you don't chase. You don't wait around for their attention like it's oxygen. You're not desperate for them to text back because you've built a life where you're already being seen, supported, and valued by others and by yourself. You become the person who doesn't just say they want respect and consistency. You embody it. This doesn't just protect you from getting hurt again. It attracts better. When you're deeply engaged in your own life, you radiate a kind of grounded confidence that people can't help but notice. The right kind of people will be drawn to your energy, not because you're trying to prove your worth, but because you already know it. You've become someone who doesn't need to chase love, because you've created space only for the kind that chases you back. And the irony is, once you're in that place, The person who once made you feel like you had to work for their attention often comes back. But by then, you've changed. You're no longer impressed by someone just showing up. You're looking for consistency, effort, and emotional maturity. You don't want to be someone's afterthought. You want to be someone's priority. And because you've built a life that doesn't revolve around being chosen, you're free to choose. Not from a place of lack, but from a place of strength. Because your life is already full, and anyone who comes into it now has to add to it, not complete it. There's a big difference between pretending someone doesn't matter and actually knowing, deep down, that they don't. Pretending is performative. It's laced with bitterness, with the secret hope that they'll notice you pulling away and come chasing after you. But real detachment, that quiet, a grounded knowing that they're not important to your happiness, comes from growth. It comes from clarity, and it's one of the most powerful places you can reach when healing from someone who didn't value you. When you stop making someone the center of your emotional world, not out of anger but from truth, you're not ignoring them to get a reaction. You're not cold or heartless. You're just done. You've seen enough. You've felt the confusion, the imbalance, the moments where you were overextending yourself, hoping they'd finally meet you halfway. And you finally called it. Not with dramatic goodbyes, not with long speeches, but with calm detachment. They no longer matter, not because they never did, but because they didn't show up in the way that mattered. You start to realize that their mixed signals, their silence, their hot and cold behavior, none of it had anything to do with your worth. That's the part we often miss. When we're caught up in someone who won't fully choose us, we internalize their lack of consistency as a reflection of who we are. Maybe if I was prettier, maybe if I was less emotional, maybe if I waited longer to respond. But it was never about any of those things. It was about who they are and what they are capable of. And when you finally see that, you stop trying to win them over, because you realize there was no prize. Knowing they don't matter doesn't mean you're numb. It means you're not dependent. It means their presence, or absence, doesn't shake your core. You're not checking your phone to see if they texted. You're not wondering what they're doing or who they're doing it with. You're busy, emotionally unavailable to anyone who doesn't show up in a healthy, consistent way. And that shift is everything. That's when you know you've grown, because you no longer react. You decide. You choose what gets your energy, your time, your heart. What's even more powerful is how subtle this transformation can be. There's no big announcement. No need to tell them off or prove you've moved on. The energy just changes. You don't chase, you don't beg, and you definitely don't perform. You're living your life on your terms now. And from that place, you become unshakable. Someone who's no longer trying to be seen by the wrong person, because they finally see themselves clearly. And yes, they might notice the change. They might come back. They might send that, "Hey, stranger," message, curious why your energy disappeared. But the beautiful part is, you won't need it. You won't read into it or assign meaning to it. You won't get excited or spiral, because your peace doesn't live in their hands anymore. You're not tempted by crumbs when you've learned to feed yourself full meals. You'll be polite, maybe even grateful for the lesson, but you won't go back. Because you know now, the right person won't need to be ignored to act right. They'll show up consistently because they want to. And until then, you won't settle for anything less. Not because you're hard to get, but because you're finally hard to lose. The moment you stop chasing someone who only gives you half of what you deserve is the moment you step back into your power. This isn't about bitterness. It's not about playing games or pretending you don't care. It's about showing, through your actions, that your energy is sacred and you won't waste it on someone who doesn't know how to hold it. When you stop showing up for someone who doesn't show up for you, you don't become colder, you be clearer. You stop begging for attention, and instead, you start building a life so rich, so full, that anyone who wants to be part of it needs to come correct. No more crumbs. No more confusion. No more wondering if you're too much. You're not too much. You were just giving too much to the wrong person. So if someone can't see your value, let them go. Let your silence speak. Let your standards protect you. And let your full, beautiful life remind you every day that the person you've been waiting for isn't them. It's you finally choosing yourself. And from that place, the right love won't just notice you, it will honor you.